The wind carried no kindness that evening. Kyle walked alone between the red cliffs with only a bow on his back and silence in his chest. Once he had belonged to the Fire Mesa Apache. Once he had sat beside warriors, hunted with brothers, and listened to the old songs under the stars. But that life had been taken from him the day he was called a traitor. No one had asked the truth. No one had waited for his words. A raid had gone wrong near the border of their land. Horses had been stolen. 2 young warriors had died. Kale had been seen returning from the eastern trail, wounded and covered in dust. That was enough for the chief to point at him before the whole tribe. You led the enemy to us. Kyle had denied it, but anger was louder than truth. Grief needed a face. So they gave it his. By sunrise, he was cast out. Since then, he had lived between mountains and shadows. He slept where coyotes howled. He drank from hidden springs. He spoke to no one unless the land itself answered. Some called him Ghost. Some called him Cursed. Kale called himself Nothing. Names belonged to people who still had a home. That evening, he followed the tracks of a wounded deer, but another sound stopped him. It was not animal. It was not wind. It was a child crying. Kyle lowered himself behind a rock and looked toward the valley below. Smoke rose from a camp near the river. Not his people. He knew the colors on the tents. The Blue River tribe. Rivals of Fire Mesa, for as long as old men could remember. Their warriors had clashed over hunting grounds, water paths, and pride. Kyle had been taught never to enter their land, but the camp was burning. 3 riders moved through the smoke. Not Apache, not Blue River. White men with dirty coats and rifles. Raiders. They were dragging bundles from the lodges and shouting like wolves, pretending to be men. A boy ran from behind a tent. One rider turned his horse toward him. Kyle did not think. His arrow flew before the rider could raise his rifle. It struck the man's shoulder and threw him from the saddle. The horse reared. The boy fell to the ground and covered his head. Kyle moved down the slope like a storm with no sound. The second rider saw him and fired. The bullet struck stone beside Kale's face. He rolled, came up, and loosed another arrow. The rider cried out and dropped his rifle. The third man cursed and turned his horse toward the trees. Kale let him run. He ran to the boy and pulled. Him behind a fallen cart. Stay low, the boy stared at him with wide eyes. You are Fire Mesa. Kyle looked toward the burning tents. Tonight I'm only a man with 2 hands. He grabbed a water skin and beat flames from the nearest lodge. An old woman crawled from the smoke, coughing hard. Kyle lifted her in his arms and carried her to the riverbank. Then he went back again. A young warrior of the Blue River tribe lay near the ashes, bleeding from his side. His hand reached for a knife when he saw Kale. Do not touch me then. Die proud if you want. Kale turned. Away! The young warrior clenched his teeth. Wait, Kyle. Knelt beside him and pressed cloth against the wound. The warrior's breath shook with pain and shame. Why help us? Kyle tied the cloth tight. Because your blood is red. Same as mine. More people came from the trees as the raiders disappeared into the dark. Women, children, elders, and a few warriors who had been hunting when the attack began. They stopped when they saw Kale among them. Every face hardened. A woman stepped forward with a knife in her hand. She was young, but her eyes carried command. Her black hair fell over one shoulder, and smoke darkened the edge of her face. She looked beautiful in a way that did not ask for softness. She looked like a flame that had learned to survive rain. Her name was Ayana. Though Kale did not know it yet, she pointed the knife at his chest. Fire Mesa dog. Kale stood slowly and lifted his empty hands. I saved your boy. She looked toward the child, then back at him. A snake can bite after it warms itself. By your fire, Kale met her gaze. Then, keep the fire away from me. The wounded young warrior spoke from the ground. He fought the raiders. The old woman coughed and raised a trembling hand. He carried me from the smoke. Ayana did not lower the knife. Why were you watching us? I was hunting on Blue River land. I followed deer. Deer do not know borders. For a moment, no one moved. Then an older man with white hair stepped from behind the others. His face was lined like dry earth. He was Chief Takoda of the Blue River people. He looked at the burned lodges, the wounded, the frightened children, and finally Kale. You saved lives tonight. Kale said nothing. Takoda's voice grew colder, but you are still. Fire Mesa. Kale looked toward the dark hills. Not Anymore, the words landed heavily. Ayana's eyes narrowed. What does that mean, Kyle? Picked up his bow. It means I have no tribe for you to hate. He turned to leave. But the little boy ran forward and caught his wrist. Do not go. The bad men may come back. Kyle froze. The boy's fingers were small, but they held him harder than chains. Ayana saw it. So did the chief. Dakota breathed slowly. The raiders know our camp is weak. They may return before dawn. Kale looked at the hills, then at the wounded people near the river. I can track them. Ayana took one step closer, or lead more enemies here. Kyle's jaw tightened. If I wanted you dead, I would have stayed on the ridge and watched the smoke. Silence followed. The chief studied him for a long time. Then you will stay until dawn. Under guard, Ayana lifted her chin. I will guard him. Kyle looked at her knife. Of course you will. Her eyes flashed. Give me one reason, and I will cut your pride from your throat. Kyle almost smiled, but the sadness in him was too deep. My pride was taken long ago. Ayana heard something in his voice that did not fit the enemy she wanted him to be. For the first time, she looked at him not as Fire Mesa, not as an outcast, but as a man standing alone in the ashes of a tribe that hated him and a tribe that feared him. The night grew colder. The Blue River people gathered what they could. Kale helped repair a broken fence around the horses. No one thanked him. No one trusted him. But no one stopped him either. Ayana watched every move. Near midnight, she stood beside him while he sharpened a broken spear point. Why were you cast out? Kyle did not look up. Ask your ghosts. They may answer better than people, I asked you. He ran the stone. Along the blade. I was blamed for something I did not do. All guilty. Men say that, and all wounded people believe anger is wisdom. Ayana's grip tightened. Around her knife. You speak boldly for a man. Surrounded by enemies, Kale finally looked at her. I have been surrounded by enemies since my own people turned their backs. The fire cracked between them. Ayana looked away first. In the distance, an owl called once. Kyle stood suddenly. Ayana raised her knife. What? He listened. Horses. She turned toward the dark ridge. I hear. Nothing. Kyle grabbed his bow. That is why. They will come close. Ayana stared at him for one breath, then ran toward the chief's lodge. Moments later, the quiet camp began to move. Warriors took positions. Mothers pulled children into the shadows. Kyle climbed the rocks above the river and watched the trail. The raiders returned with more men, and this time they came to finish what they had started. Kyle drew his bow. Below him, Ayana looked up. Their eyes met through smoke and moonlight. She still did not trust him, but for the first time she hoped he was telling the truth. The first shot shattered the silence before dawn. A muzzle flash burst from the darkness beyond the ridge. A bullet struck a wagon wheel and exploded wood into the air. Children screamed. Horses pulled against their ropes. The raiders had returned. Kyle released his first arrow. The shaft crossed the moonlit valley and struck a rider in the arm. The man tumbled from his horse and vanished into the dust. Below, Blue River warriors rushed to defensive positions. They were outnumbered, and everyone knew it. Chief Dakota shouted orders across the camp. Protect the children, protect the elders. Do not let them cross the river. The raiders spread out along the hillside. There were nearly 20 of them now. Some carried rifles, others held torches. They wanted to finish what they had started. Kale moved across the rocks like a shadow. His arrows found targets before the raiders even knew where he stood. One man fell, then another. The attackers began firing toward the cliffs. Ayana watched from below. She hated admitting it, but without Kale, the camp would already be overrun. A group of raiders suddenly rushed toward the western side of the village, where several children were hiding. Ayana sprinted to intercept them. She fought fiercely, striking one man with her knife and knocking another from his horse. But a third raider grabbed her arm and threw her to the ground. Her knife slid into the dirt. The raider raised his rifle like a club. Ayana prepared for the blow. It never came. An arrow appeared in the man's chest. The raider collapsed beside her. Kyle stood 20 yards away with another arrow already drawn. For a brief second, their eyes met. Ayana nodded once. It was not gratitude, not yet, but it was no longer hatred. The battle continued until the eastern sky began turning grey. The raiders finally realized the attack was failing. Their leader shouted a retreat. One by one they disappeared into the hills. Soon only silence remained. Smoke drifted above the camp. The Blue River people had survived, but the victory carried a price. Several warriors were wounded. 2 elders had been injured during the attack. Many lodges had burned. As the sun rose, Chief Takoda gathered everyone near the river. Kyle remained apart from the crowd. That was where he belonged. Alone. Takoda stepped forward. This camp still stands because of one man. Many eyes turned toward Kyle. The chief continued. Last night he fought for people who were not his own. Some warriors looked uncomfortable, others looked angry. A few looked ashamed. Takoda raised his hand. No matter where he comes from, no matter what tribe once claimed him. Today he is our guest. Murmurs spread through the gathering. One warrior stepped forward. He is Fire Mesa. Takoda faced him, and yet he risked his life for us. The warrior had no answer. For the first time since his exile, Kyle felt something strange. Respect, not much, only a spark. But it had been years since anyone looked at him as a man instead of a criminal. Later that afternoon, Kyle prepared to leave. He packed his small bundle and checked the string of his bow. Ayana found him near the river. "You are leaving," Kyle nodded. "Your people survived. They are not my people." "No. Not yet." Kyle looked at her carefully. "That is a dangerous thing to say." Ayana sat on a nearby rock. "Maybe." The river flowed quietly between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ayana broke the silence. The raiders knew exactly where to strike. Kyle looked at her. "You think someone helped them? I think someone is feeding them information." Kyle frowned. The attack had felt too organized, too precise. The raiders had known where supplies were stored. They had known where guards were weakest. Ayana continued, "My father believes they simply got lucky, you do not." "No." Kyle stared toward the mountains. "Neither do I." Ayana seemed surprised. "You agree. I have fought raiders before. These men were guided." The realization settled heavily between them. Someone wanted the Blue River tribe destroyed. Someone nearby. Someone who understood them. For the next few minutes they discussed possibilities. The conversation felt natural, too natural. Both noticed it. Neither mentioned it. Finally, Ayana stood. "My father wants to thank you before you leave." Kyle shook his head. "I do not need thanks." "Maybe not. But he wishes to offer something else." "What?" Ayana smiled slightly. "A place at our fire." Kyle almost laughed. The sound surprised even him. The Blue River warriors would hate that, some already do. Then why offer it? Ayana looked directly into his eyes. "Because my father believes honor matters more than old grudges." For a long moment, Kyle said nothing. He had spent years alone. Years surviving one season at a time. The idea of belonging somewhere again felt impossible, dangerous, yet strangely tempting. That evening, he joined the tribe around the central fire. Many faces remained suspicious, others watched with curiosity. Chief Takoda offered him food. Kyle accepted. The simple gesture felt heavier than any gift. Across the flames, Ayana sat quietly. The firelight danced across her face. For the first time, Kyle truly saw her, not as an enemy, not as a rival tribe warrior, as a woman, strong, fearless, beautiful. The realization unsettled him. Forbidden paths always began with small steps. Neither of them knew it yet. But fate had already started leading them toward one another, and somewhere beyond the mountains, another danger was watching. The surviving raider leader sat beside a campfire. Across from him sat a man wrapped in a dark blanket, a man whose face remained hidden. The stranger tossed a small pouch of silver onto the ground. "The Blue River tribe still lives," the raider growled. "Not for long," the stranger replied. His voice carried calm hatred. "What about the Apache outcast?" The stranger became very still. "Then kill him first, because if Kyle learns the truth about his exile, everything will change." 3 days passed before Kyle decided to stay longer. His original plan had been simple: leave at sunrise, return to the lonely mountains, forget the Blue River tribe, and continue surviving as he always had. But something kept pulling him back. Part of it was the mystery surrounding the raids. Part of it was Ayana. Neither reason made him comfortable. That morning, Kyle examined tracks beyond the northern ridge. Several horses had crossed the area recently, more than enough for another attack force. When he returned to camp, Chief Takoda was waiting. "What did you find?" Kyle knelt and drew lines in the dirt. "The raiders have a camp somewhere east of here. Can you find it?" "Yes." The chief nodded slowly. "Then we must know who is helping them." Kyle agreed. The attacks were too precise. Someone nearby was feeding information to the enemy. Someone who knew tribal movements. Someone trusted. The thought troubled everyone. Later that day, Ayana approached him near the river. "My father wants a scouting party." Kyle looked up. "How many warriors?" "3. Too many." She frowned. "Why?" "Because a large group leaves tracks. A small group disappears." Ayana crossed her arms. "Then take one warrior." "No." Her eyes narrowed. "You are difficult, so are you." For a second, neither spoke. Then Ayana surprised him. "Good, I am coming." Kyle almost smiled. "You did not ask." "I know." By sunset, they were riding east together. The land became rough and rocky. Red cliffs rose around them like giant walls. Eagles circled high above. For hours they followed signs only Kyle seemed able to see. Broken grass, fresh hoofprints, a disturbed patch of sand. Finally they reached a narrow canyon. Kyle dismounted immediately. "Someone is here." Ayana slid from her horse and crouched beside him. "How many?" "At least 10, maybe more." They moved silently between the rocks. Soon voices drifted through the canyon. Kyle signaled for Ayana to stay low. From behind a ridge they spotted the raider camp. There were tents, horses, rifles, and several men gathered around a fire. Then Kyle noticed something that froze him. One of the men wore a necklace carved from black stone. His eyes widened. Ayana saw his expression. "What is it?" Kyle stared at the necklace. "I know that symbol." The raider turned slightly. The carving became clearer. Ayana watched Kyle carefully. "You have seen it before." Kyle nodded. "Only once." "We're among the Fire Mesa tribe." Ayana felt a chill. "You think someone from your old tribe is involved?" "I do not know. But someone connected to them is." Before they could continue, another voice echoed through the camp. A man emerged from the largest tent. His face remained hidden beneath a hat, yet the raiders immediately obeyed him. The mysterious leader pointed toward a map spread across a table. Blue River. Even from a distance, Kyle heard the words, "Attack again. Destroy everything." Ayana's stomach tightened. The stranger wanted her people wiped out. Suddenly a rock shifted beneath her foot. A sharp crack echoed through the canyon. Every head turned. The camp fell silent. Then someone shouted, "There!" Kyle grabbed Ayana's arm. "Run!" Gunfire exploded behind them. Bullets struck stone. Dust filled the air. They raced toward their horses as raiders poured out of the camp. The chase had begun, and now the enemy knew exactly who was spying on them. Kyle and Ayana reached their horses just as bullets shattered the rocks around them. "Ride!" Ayana needed no second warning. They mounted and raced through the canyon while the raiders followed close behind. Hooves thundered across the ground. Dust filled the air. A bullet struck a rock beside Kyle's head. Another narrowly missed Ayana. The raiders were gaining. Ahead, the canyon split into two narrow paths. Kyle pointed left. "This way." Ayana trusted him without hesitation. The realization surprised them both. They pushed their horses harder. Soon the canyon became too narrow for a large group to pass easily. The pursuing riders were forced to slow down. Kyle suddenly pulled his horse to a stop. "What are you doing?" "Buying us time." Before Ayana could argue, Kyle leaped from his horse and climbed a rocky slope. He grabbed a loose boulder and shoved with all his strength. The stone rolled downward, then another, then another. The cliffside erupted. Rocks crashed into the narrow trail behind them. Dust exploded into the air. Horses screamed. Raiders shouted. Within seconds, the passage was completely blocked. The chase was over. At least for now. Several hours later, they returned to the Blue River camp. Chief Takoda listened carefully as they described what they had seen. The chief's expression darkened. "Someone wants us destroyed." Kyle nodded. "And they have help." The council gathered that evening. Warriors argued around the central fire. Some wanted to attack immediately. Others wanted to abandon the valley and move the tribe. The discussion grew heated. Then one warrior stood. His name was Noken. He was among the strongest fighters in the tribe, and one of the few who openly disliked Kyle. Why should we trust the word of an outsider? Several warriors nodded. Nokan pointed directly at Kyle. "Perhaps he is leading us into a trap." Ayana immediately stood. "He saved our people twice." "That proves nothing." Kyle remained silent. He was used to suspicion. But Ayana was not. "You were not there," she said. "Neither were you when he fought for us." Nokan's jaw tightened. "I know one thing. He is Fire Mesa." Kyle finally spoke. "Not anymore." Nokan laughed. "You think one good deed erases your blood?" The camp fell silent. Everyone waited for Kale's response. Instead of anger, he simply looked at the warrior. "I did not choose where I was born, but I choose what kind of man I become." Several elders exchanged glances. Even Chief Takoda seemed impressed. Nokan sat down without another word. The council ended soon afterward. As darkness settled over the camp, Kyle walked alone toward the river. The moon reflected across the water. For the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Peace. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You handled that better than I would have." Ayana approached. Kale smiled faintly. "That is because you enjoy winning arguments," she laughed. The sound surprised both of them. For a moment the world felt simple. No tribes, no enemies, no war. Just two people beside a river. Ayana sat next to him. The silence between them felt comfortable, dangerously comfortable. Finally she spoke. "What were you like before your exile?" Kyle stared at the water. "Different." "How?" I laughed more. Ayana looked at him. "I would like to meet that man someday." Kyle turned toward her. The moonlight softened her features. For several seconds neither looked away. Something changed in that moment. Neither could deny it. The feeling frightened them. Ayana stood first. "This is a bad idea." Kyle knew exactly what she meant. "Yes." She took a step backward. "You are Fire Mesa, and you are Blue River." The old hatred between their tribes stretched back generations. People had died because of it. Ayana lowered her eyes. "Good night, Kyle." "Good night." She walked away. But neither slept much that night. Far beyond the valley, another man remained awake as well. The mysterious leader sat inside his tent. A frightened messenger stood before him. The Apache outcast escaped. The stranger's expression darkened. And the Blue River woman. She escaped too. The stranger slowly removed a necklace from around his neck, a black stone carving identical to the one Kale had seen. "Soon," he said quietly, "both of them will lead me exactly where I want to go." Then he smiled, and for the first time, the firelight revealed part of his face. Kyle would have recognized him instantly, because the man was not a stranger at all. He was someone from Kale's past, someone believed to be dead. The next morning began with bad news. A hunting party returned to camp carrying an injured warrior. His horse had been shot near the eastern hills. Fortunately, he had escaped before the attackers could finish the job. The message was clear. The raiders were getting closer. Chief Takoda called another council. This time the mood was darker. Fear had begun spreading through the tribe. If the attacks continued, food supplies would become difficult to gather. Families were already afraid to travel beyond the valley. Kale listened quietly. Then he stood. "We are defending the wrong place." The council turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Takoda asked. "The raiders choose where and when to attack. We react. That gives them the advantage." Several warriors nodded reluctantly. Nokan crossed his arms. "So what is your solution?" Kyle pointed toward the east. "We find the man leading them, and end this." The idea was risky, very risky. But everyone knew he was right. After a long discussion, Takoda agreed to send a small team. Kaisal, Ayana, Nokan, and 2 experienced scouts. They would track the enemy and discover the identity of the mysterious leader. The group left before sunrise the following day. For 2 days they followed trails through rocky hills and dry riverbeds. The journey was tense. Nokan barely spoke to Kyle. Whenever he did, it was usually an insult. Ayana grew increasingly frustrated. On the second evening, they stopped beside a small stream. The scouts prepared camp while Kyle examined tracks nearby. Ayana joined him. "You know Nokan does not trust you." Kyle shrugged. "He is not required to. You do not care." "I stopped caring what people think years ago." Ayana studied his face. "That is not true." Kale looked away. Perhaps once it was, the answer carried more pain than he intended. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ayana gently touched his arm. "One day they will know the truth." Kyle looked at her hand resting on his sleeve. His heartbeat quickened. So did hers. Neither moved, neither wanted to. Then voices from camp broke the moment. Ayana quickly stepped back. The distance returned, but something important had changed. That night sleep came slowly. Just before dawn, Kyle heard movement beyond the camp. He reached for his knife and slipped into the darkness. A figure moved among the trees. Kyle followed silently. The stranger stopped near a rocky cliff and looked around nervously. Then he removed something from his pocket, a small piece of black stone, the same symbol, the same carving. Kyle's eyes narrowed. The stranger was one of their own scouts. A traitor. Before Kyle could move, the man suddenly froze. He had heard something. The scout turned and saw Kyle standing behind him. Fear appeared instantly on his face. Then he ran. Kyle chased him through the trees. Branches snapped, rocks rolled beneath their feet. The traitor sprinted toward the cliffs. "Stop!" The man ignored him. Suddenly an arrow flew from nowhere. It struck the scout in the back. The man collapsed instantly. Kyle dropped beside him. The scout was dying. Blood stained the ground. "Who sent you?" The man's breathing became shallow. Kyle grabbed his shoulders. "Who?" The scout struggled to speak. Finally he whispered 2 words. "Red Hawk." Kyle froze. The world seemed to stop. Red Hawk. Impossible. Years ago, Red Hawk had been one of Fire Mesa's greatest warriors. He had also been Kale's older brother, and everyone believed he had died during a battle near the northern mountains. The dying scout grabbed Kale's wrist. "He is alive." Then the man took his final breath. Kale remained motionless. His brother. Alive. And somehow connected to everything. Ayana arrived moments later with the others. She immediately saw the shock on Kyle's face. What happened? Kyle stared at the dead scout. For years he had searched for answers about his exile. Now those answers suddenly had a name. Red Hawk. Ayana's eyes widened. "Your brother." Kyle nodded slowly, and for the first time since his exile, he realized who had destroyed his life. The enemy hunting the Blue River tribe. The man who framed him. The man hiding behind the raids was his own brother. The journey back to the Blue River Valley felt very different. No one spoke much. The discovery of the traitor had changed everything. Kale rode at the front of the group with his thoughts locked on one name. Red Hawk. His older brother had taught him how to hunt, how to track, how to survive winter storms. For years, Kale had mourned him. Now he learned that Red Hawk was alive. Worse, he was responsible for the suffering of 2 tribes. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. When they finally returned to camp, Chief Takoda gathered the council immediately. Kyle told them everything: the dead scout, the black stone symbol, the name Red Hawk. The council sat in stunned silence. One elder finally spoke. "Why would your brother do this?" Kale shook his head. "I do not know, but I intend to find out." Nokan stood abruptly. "This changes nothing." Several warriors looked at him. "The enemy is still Fire Mesa, The enemy is Red Hawk, Ayana replied. Nokan frowned. He is Fire Mesa. Ayana's patience finally broke. And Kyle saved your life 3 days ago. The camp fell silent. Nokan looked away. The truth was difficult to argue with. Chief Dakota raised his hand. Enough. The chief looked directly at Kyle. What will you do now? Kyle answered without hesitation. Find him. Alone. Ayana immediately shook her head. No. Kyle looked at her. This is my burden. No, she said firmly. This concerns my people too. The chief studied them carefully. Then he surprised everyone. You will both go. Kyle and Ayana exchanged glances. Together, Dakota nodded. Together. The next morning, they departed before sunrise. This time there were no scouts, no warriors, only Kyle and Ayana. The trail led north toward the mountains, the same mountains where Red Hawk had supposedly died years earlier. For 2 days they followed clues, old campsites, hidden supply caches, tracks left by riders moving between valleys. On the 3rd evening, they reached a beautiful lake surrounded by pine trees. The setting sun painted the water gold. They decided to rest. For once, there were no enemies nearby, no arguments, no danger. Only silence. Ayana sat beside the lake while Kale prepared a small fire. The peaceful moment felt strange after weeks of conflict. Ayana smiled. You know something. What? You laugh more now. Kale looked surprised. Do I? Yes. That is your fault. She laughed softly. I will accept responsibility. The fire crackled between them. The distance that once existed had nearly disappeared. Ayana looked toward the lake. When this is over, what will you do? Kyle thought for a moment. I do not know. For years, survival was enough. And now? Now I want more. Ayana turned toward him. Like what? Kyle met her eyes. A future. Neither looked away. The moment stretched. The world around them seemed to disappear. No rival tribes, no war, no fear, only 2 hearts trying to ignore what had become impossible to deny. Ayana's voice softened. This can never be easy, I know. Our tribes would never accept it, I know. Yet neither moved away. Finally, Ayana reached for his hand. Kyle gently held hers. For the first time, neither fought the feeling between them. Under the stars beside the lake, they shared their first kiss. It was brief, tender and unforgettable. When they finally pulled apart, both smiled. For the first time in years, Kale felt truly alive. But happiness rarely arrives alone. Near midnight, a sound echoed through the forest. A horse, then another. Kale instantly stood. Ayana reached for her knife. Voices drifted through the trees. Not raiders, not Blue River, not strangers. Fire Mesa warriors. A large group emerged from the darkness. At their head rode an older chief. Kale recognized him immediately. Chief White Bear. The very man who had exiled him years ago. The warriors surrounded the camp, weapons ready. White Bear stared at Kyle with disbelief. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the old chief finally said the words Kyle never expected to hear. We made a terrible mistake. Kyle's heart stopped, because after all these years his tribe had finally learned the truth. Kale could barely believe what he was hearing. The old chief stood beside the fire with regret written across his face. For years, Kale had imagined this moment. He had imagined anger, revenge, accusations. Instead, he felt only exhaustion. What mistake! Chief White Bear slowly dismounted. We learned the truth about the raid. Kyle remained silent. The chief continued. Red Hawk lied to us. The words struck harder than any blow. Several Fire Mesa warriors lowered their heads in shame. White Bear stepped closer. He convinced us you betrayed the tribe. He forged evidence, he bribed witnesses, and when questions appeared, he disappeared before anyone could uncover the truth. Kale's fists tightened. All these years his own brother had destroyed his life. Why White Bear shook his head? We do not know. But he has changed. One of the warriors spoke. He gathered outlaws and raiders. He promised them wealth. He speaks of building his own kingdom, another added. Anyone who refuses him disappears. The Red Hawk they described sounded like a stranger. The brother Kyle remembered would never have harmed innocent people. Something terrible had happened, or perhaps Red Hawk had always hidden his true nature. White Bear lowered his eyes. Kyle, we wronged you. The chief knelt. A chief, kneeling before an outcast. Every warrior behind him followed. Ayana watched in silence. She understood how important this moment was. For years, Kyle had carried a wound no one could see. Now at last, the truth stood before everyone. You are not an outcast, White Bear said. You never were. You are Fire Mesa. You are one of us. The apology was sincere, deeply sincere, yet Kyle felt strangely empty. Part of him wanted to forgive immediately. Another part remembered years of loneliness, years of suffering, years without a home. Finally he spoke. I accept the truth. The warriors looked relieved, but I cannot forget the years that were stolen. No one argued, no one could. White Bear nodded sadly. You have every right. That night, the two tribes shared the same campfire. For the first time in generations, Fire Mesa and Blue River warriors sat together peacefully. The old rivalry suddenly seemed foolish compared to the danger threatening them all. As darkness deepened, Kale walked away from the gathering. Ayana soon joined him. You handled that well. I am not sure. You could have chosen hatred. Kale looked toward the stars. I have carried enough hatred already. Ayana smiled softly. That is one reason I love you. The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence followed. Ayana froze. Kyle stared at her. For a moment, neither moved. Then Kyle smiled. Good. Because I love you too. Ayana laughed through tears. The relief felt overwhelming. Months of fear, doubt, distance, gone in an instant. They embraced beneath the moonlight. Neither cared who saw, neither cared about tribal borders. Love had already crossed those lines long ago. The following morning, both tribes began preparing for war, not against each other, against Red Hawk. Scouts gathered information. Warriors sharpened weapons. Messengers carried plans between camps. For the first time, Fire Mesa and Blue River stood united. Late that afternoon, a scout returned at full speed. His horse was exhausted, his face pale. Chief White Bear immediately stepped forward. What happened? The scout struggled to catch his breath. Red Hawk is moving. Where? Toward Blue River Valley. Ayana's expression darkened. The scout nodded. And he is bringing everyone. How many? At least 50 riders. The camp fell silent. That was more than anyone expected. Red Hawk was no longer planning raids. He was planning destruction. The scout swallowed hard. There is more. Every eye turned toward him. The scout's voice trembled. Red Hawk knows Kale is alive. A cold silence followed. Then the scout spoke the final words. He sent a message. What message? White Bear asked. The scout looked directly at Kale. Red Hawk says he will burn both tribes unless his little brother comes to meet him alone. The challenge hung in the air like a storm cloud. Kyle understood immediately. This was never only about war. For Red Hawk, it had always been personal. And now the final confrontation was coming. The camp argued long into the night. Everyone knew Red Hawk's demand was a trap. If Kale went alone, he would almost certainly die. If he refused, Red Hawk would attack both tribes. Neither choice was acceptable. Finally, Kale stood. I will go. The reaction was immediate. No, Ayana rose to her feet before anyone else. You are not sacrificing yourself. Kyle looked at her calmly. If Red Hawk wants me, then I can buy time. Buy time for what? For both tribes to prepare. Ayana shook her head. There has to be another way. Chief White Bear agreed. You will not face him alone. The discussion continued until dawn. Eventually a plan was formed. Kale would appear to accept Red Hawk's challenge, but hidden warriors from both tribes would secretly move into position. If Red Hawk tried anything, they would strike. 3 days later they arrived at the meeting place. An abandoned valley surrounded by towering cliffs. Red Hawk had chosen it carefully. There was nowhere to hide, or so he believed. As the sun climbed higher, Cale rode alone into the center of the valley. His heart remained steady. His bow hung across his back. His knife rested at his side. Around him the valley stood silent. Then a rider appeared, followed by another, then 10 more. Soon dozens of armed men emerged from the rocks. Outlaws, raiders, mercenaries. At their center rode Red Hawk. Kyle felt a strange sadness when he finally saw him. His brother looked older, harder. The warmth that once lived in his eyes was gone. Only ambition remained. Red Hawk smiled. "Little brother," Kyle stared at him. "Why?" The smile faded. "Why what? Why destroy innocent people? Why destroy me?" For a moment, Red Hawk remained silent. Then he laughed. "Because I was tired of living in shadows." Cale frowned. "What are you talking about?" Red Hawk pointed at him. "You were always the favorite. Father trusted you. The tribe admired you. Even when I won battles, they talked about Cale. Even when I led warriors, they praised Cale." The bitterness in his voice shocked everyone. "You ruined your own life," Kyle said quietly. "No, you stole mine." Red Hawk's anger exploded. "I deserved everything you had." The years of hatred poured from him like poison. Kyle finally understood. His brother had not become evil overnight. The jealousy had been growing for years, hidden beneath smiles and loyalty. Then Red Hawk's expression changed. Cold, dangerous. "Enough talking." He raised his hand. At once, hundreds of rifles appeared along the cliffs. Kyle's eyes widened. The trap. Red Hawk grinned. "Did you really think I would not expect your tribes to hide warriors nearby?" Suddenly, gunfire erupted. The ambush had been discovered. Smoke filled the valley. Bullets struck rocks. Warriors from Fire Mesa and Blue River charged from their hiding places. The battle began instantly. Chaos spread everywhere. Kyle fought through the confusion toward his brother. Ayana emerged from the smoke with Blue River warriors beside her. Fire Mesa fighters attacked from the opposite ridge. Together they pushed against Red Hawk's forces. For the first time, both tribes fought side by side. The battle raged for hours. Slowly, the raiders began losing ground. Many surrendered, others fled, but Red Hawk remained. At sunset, only 2 men still stood in the center of the valley, Kyle and his brother. The fighting around them slowed. Everyone watched. Red Hawk drew his knife. "Finish it." Kyle stepped forward. Not with hatred, not with anger, only with determination. The final confrontation between the brothers had begun, and before the next sunrise, one of them would change the future of both tribes forever. The valley became silent. The battle had nearly ended. Most of Red Hawk's followers had surrendered or fled. The remaining warriors stood back and watched. No one moved. No one spoke. All eyes rested on the 2 brothers. The setting sun painted the cliffs with red light. Red Hawk slowly circled Kyle. "You always were the tribe's hero." Kyle remained calm. "I never wanted your place." Red Hawk laughed bitterly. "That is what made them love you." The older brother attacked suddenly. His knife flashed toward Kyle's chest. Kyle stepped aside and blocked the strike. Steel clashed. Dust rose beneath their feet. The fight was fast and brutal. Both men knew each other's style. Both had learned from the same teachers. Several times Red Hawk attacked with deadly force. Several times Kyle defended himself without striking back. Ayana watched nervously from the edge of the valley. Chief White Bear stood beside her. Why does he hesitate? Because he still loves his brother. The answer broke her heart. Red Hawk noticed it too. "Your weakness is still the same." Kyle said nothing. "You cannot hurt people you love." Red Hawk lunged again. This time Kyle disarmed him. The knife flew across the dirt. Gasps spread through the crowd. The fight should have ended. But Red Hawk pulled a hidden pistol from beneath his coat. Ayana's blood ran cold. Kyle, the gun pointed directly at Kale's chest. Red Hawk's hand trembled. Years of jealousy, years of hatred, years of obsession, everything had led to this moment. "You should have died years ago." Kale stared at him. "No." The pistol shook slightly. You ruined everything. No, brother, you did. The words hit harder than any weapon. For a brief moment, Red Hawk looked lost. Not angry, not dangerous, just broken. A man who had spent years chasing power only to discover it brought him nothing. Then a rifle shot echoed across the valley. Everyone froze. Red Hawk looked down. Blood slowly spread across his shoulder. The bullet had come from one of his remaining followers. The outlaw lowered his rifle. He wanted to escape and believed Red Hawk was now a burden. Chaos erupted. Several raiders tried to flee. Others tackled the gunman. Red Hawk staggered backward toward the edge of a rocky cliff. Kyle immediately rushed forward. Brother. Red Hawk lost his footing. The ground beneath him crumbled. For one terrifying second, he began falling. Kyle lunged and caught his arm. The entire valley held its breath. Red Hawk dangled above a steep drop. Kyle strained to hold him. The older brother stared upward in disbelief. After everything, after all the lies, after all the suffering, Kyle was still trying to save him. Why? Kyle's voice shook with effort. Because you are my brother. Tears appeared in Red Hawk's eyes for the first time in many years. I do not deserve it. Maybe not. The confession finally came. I framed you. I lied. I caused everything. I know. I am sorry. The words were barely a whisper. Then the wounded ledge beneath Red Hawk collapsed further. Kyle tried to pull him up, but Red Hawk made a choice. He released Kyle's hand. No. Kyle reached for him, but it was too late. Red Hawk fell onto a lower rocky slope far below. The drop did not kill him, but his injuries were severe. Warriors quickly climbed down and carried him back. The tribal healer worked through the night. By sunrise, Red Hawk was alive, weak, broken, but alive. He confessed everything before both tribes, every lie, every crime, every betrayal. At last, the truth was known. Kyle's name was completely cleared. The outcast was innocent. The hero had been innocent all along. When the gathering ended, Chief Whitebear stood before everyone. Then he spoke words that changed history. Fire Mesa and Blue River have suffered enough. The old chief looked toward Dakota. Perhaps it is time for old enemies to become allies. For the first time, the two chiefs clasped hands. The crowd erupted with cheers. The war was over. The hatred was ending. And standing beside Kyle, Ayanna smiled through tears. For the first time since they met, they could finally imagine a future together. A future that no longer seemed impossible, but one final challenge still remained. The tribes might accept peace. Would they accept their love? The weeks that followed changed everything. For the first time in generations, Fire Mesa and Blue River warriors hunted together. Children played together. Families visited one another without fear. The old hatred that had poisoned both tribes slowly began to fade. It did not disappear overnight. But it disappeared. Red Hawk remained under guard while recovering from his injuries. He no longer fought his fate. One afternoon he asked to see Kyle. The brothers met beside a small stream. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Red Hawk lowered his head. I spent years blaming you for my failures. Kyle listened quietly. I thought power would make me happy. Did it? No. The answer came instantly. Red Hawk looked toward the water. I destroyed everything that mattered. Kyle sat beside him. Not everything. Red Hawk looked confused. You are still alive. For the first time in years, the older brother smiled. A small smile, but a real one. Perhaps redemption had finally begun. A month later, both tribes gathered in the valley where the final battle had taken place. This time there were no weapons, no enemies, no fear, only celebration. Chief Whitebear and Chief Dakota stood together before hundreds of people. Today we honor peace, Dakota announced. Cheers echoed through the valley, then Whitebear raised his hand. And today we honor the man who helped make it possible. Kyle immediately realized what was happening. He hated being the center of attention. The crowd laughed as he visibly wished to disappear. Whitebear smiled. For years he carried a burden that was never his. For years he lived as an outcast, yet when given every reason to seek revenge, he chose compassion. The crowd applauded. Many warriors struck their spears against the ground in respect. Ayana watched proudly. Then Chief Takoda surprised everyone. "There is one more matter." The crowd became quiet. Takoda turned toward his daughter. "Ayana." The young woman stepped forward. Then the chief looked at Kyle. "And you?" Kyle suddenly looked nervous. The crowd noticed. That made them laugh even harder. Takoda smiled. "The two of you have done a poor job hiding your feelings." Ayana covered her face. Kyle looked ready to run into the mountains. The chiefs exchanged amused glances. For generations our tribes refused to unite. Perhaps the Great Spirit has chosen another path. The crowd immediately understood. Smiles spread everywhere. Takoda raised his voice. "If you both wish it, you have our blessing." The valley erupted. Warriors cheered. Children shouted. Even the elders laughed. Ayana looked at Kyle. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kyle walked toward her. "Are you sure?" She smiled through happy tears. "I have been sure for a very long time." Kale took her hands. "Then I am sure too." The celebration lasted until nightfall. Months later, under a sky filled with stars, Kale and Ayana were married. People from both tribes attended. What would once have been impossible had become reality. The wedding was not merely the union of two people, it was the union of two nations, two histories, two futures. As the evening ended, Kyle stood beside Ayana overlooking the valley. The same valley where they had first fought together. The same valley where hatred had nearly destroyed everything. Now it was filled with laughter, music, life. Ayana rested her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever miss being alone?" Kyle smiled. "Not even a little," she laughed. "Good answer." Kyle looked across the valley. Years ago he had lost his home. Years ago he had lost his tribe. Years ago he had lost his future. Yet somehow life had given him something greater, a family, a purpose, a love worth fighting for. The outcast who had once wandered alone through the mountains had become something else entirely, a bridge between two tribes, a symbol of peace, and a man deeply loved. As the stars shone above them, Kyle wrapped his arm around Ayana. The future stretched before them. Bright, peaceful, and finally their own.